This movie beautifully portrays the love between a teacher and a student. The story reveals how love develops between the two and how far their bond goes. Let's begin. Lila is a 38-year-old teacher who recently got divorced. She is traveling somewhere on a train when we see Smith sitting alone in his room looking very nervous and lost in thought. Meanwhile, Lila reaches her school where the principal welcomes her and introduces her to the staff. She is also informed about which class she will be teaching. It turns out that the class Smith is in is the one Lila is assigned to. However, their first impression of each other is not remarkable as Smith is very quiet and doesn't speak much. After school hours, we see Smith's family who are overly insecure about him as his older brother is in jail for smuggling. They don't want Smith to follow in his brother's footsteps, so they keep changing his school in hopes of improving his performance. However, no progress is made. Eventually, Smith, frustrated, runs away and starts doing the same things his brother did, dealing in drugs and moving things around for money. But he is not doing this for himself. His dream is to provide a good education for his younger sister as his parents cannot afford it. The story continues, and the next day Lila doesn't pay much attention to Smith either. After class, the school's social player introduces himself to Lila and invites her to lunch, which she accepts. Meanwhile, Smith and his friends talk about their new teacher. At night, Lila feels lonely and misses her mom, so she calls her and starts a conversation joined by her brother. On the other hand, Smith comes home late and his mother advises him to stop hanging out with his bad friends and make better choices. Smith gets angry and storms off to his room. The next day after class, Smith asks Lila for help in writing an essay. She asks him about the topic, but Smith says it's personal and he can't share it. Lila then tells him to let her know what he wants to know about her, hoping to bond better with her students since she is new and doesn't have many connections yet. However, Smith doesn't tell her and leaves the classroom. Lila follows him thinking he might be upset, but then Cheyenne, another teacher, stops her and tells her not to waste her time on these students as they won't amount to much. Lila, however, ever remains confident that she can behave well with all her students and maintain a friendly bond with them, so the next day she checks all the students' personal details which were collected during the admission process. She discovers that Smith is a new student who had been expelled from his previous school due to frequent fights. Afterward, she gathers everyone and listens to the poetry they've written one by one. It's finally Smith's turn. When he recites his poem, Lila gets lost in it for a while. She couldn't quite understand the emotion she just felt. Anyway, after submitting his homework, Smith prepares to leave, but Lila stops him to praise tells him that he should share the emotions he has inside with someone. Doing so will make him feel better. However, Smith was the kind of guy who never shared much about himself with anyone. Later, when Lila gets home, she finds divorce papers sent by her ex-husband. He had already signed them, but she just sets them aside. A few days later, Andrew, who was a salsa coach, invites Lila to dinner that evening. Since she didn't really have anyone in her life at the moment, she agrees. She heads to her class, where for the first time we see a bit of casual bonding between Lila and Smith. Smith shares a few things with Lila before heading home. While Leia goes to her dinner date with Andrew, she spends a nice time with Andrew, but while they are dancing, Smith happens to see her. He doesn't disturb her, just watches from a distance. The next day when Lila gets to school, she notices Smith leaving her class. When the school day ends, Smith comes back running to apologize to her. Lila reassures him that she stayed back just to teach him because she noticed he wasn't feeling well. Jokingly, Smith replies, "I drank too much last night." Surprised, Lila asks him what he means. Smith then admits he saw her at the bar the previous night. Lila starts laughing and asks him not to tell anyone about it. This leads to a nice conversation between the two. Later that night, we see Lila talking to her mother about her date. When Smith shows up at her door, he looks like he's been badly beaten up. Lila immediately asks him to come inside, tends to his wounds, and asks him what happened, but Smith doesn't say anything and tries to leave. Lila stops him, saying it's too late, and offers to drop him home. On the way, Lila tries asking about his family, but Smith avoids answering. When they stop, he gets out of the car as it's raining heavily outside. The weather has become beautiful. Initially, Lila hesitates to get out, but after a while she steps outside. Seeing her, Smith asks if she would teach him the dance she was doing at the bar. He steps closer, but Lila moves away and gets back into the car before dropping him home. She explains to him that it's better if their relationship stays strictly teacher-student. Smith doesn't respond to this and leaves. The next day, Lila avoids giving him much attention, which Smith notices. He decides not to bother her unnecessarily and goes home. At home, his mother sees his grades, which have significantly improved, and she feels very proud. She tells him she's happy he's focusing on his studies. Smith replies that it's all thanks to his new teacher who helps him study. Hearing this, his mother says, "Oh, then I should meet her sometime." That night Lila goes on another date with Andrew, but Smith is also there. Lila gets bored and annoyed with Andrew's endless questions and excuses herself to the washroom. Smith follows her. When she steps out, Smith kisses her. Leah, unable to stop herself, kisses him back and realizes she's starting to fall for him. However, she soon realizes she's making a mistake and quickly returns to her seat. Andrew was sitting alone when Cheyenne approached him and started talking about Smith and the student in clear terms. She was trying to turn him against them. Meanwhile, Smith reached Lila's house, but the gate was locked. After repeatedly asking her, she finally opened it. Smith told her he wasn't there to hurt her but to confess that he liked her. Leah, however, told him to stay away, explaining that being close to her would only bring him trouble. She insisted he leave immediately. Despite this, their feelings for each other were undeniable, and soon they gave in to their emotions and shared a romantic moment. By morning, Lila asked Smith to promise he wouldn't tell anyone about what happened between them. The scene shifted to the school where Lila was sitting alone. Sean approached her announcing that she and Andrew were now dating. Lila congratulated her and appeared genuinely happy for her. Meanwhile, Smith borrowed some money from his smuggler friends and returned to school. When Andrew saw Lila, he asked about her mother. Although he liked her, he had his reasons for holding back, and Cheyenne seemed to be the more practical choice for him. Smith then showed up and Lila left with him, which upset Andrew, who couldn't help feeling jealous. Later in class, Smith gave Lila a gift, a gold chain he bought with the borrowed money. Lila loved the gift. Smith also proposed to her, but she simply smiled and didn't give an answer. When Smith leaned in to kiss her, Lila stopped him, reminding him that they had to keep things normal in public to avoid raising suspicions. Despite this, they enjoyed each other's company outside, spending time together, eating and having fun. Their love story continued, but no love story is complete without challenges. The two decided to take a trip outside the city where they clicked pictures and shared deeper conversations. Smith opened up about his family during this time. After returning home, some of Smith's smuggler friends confronted him about the money he owed. They gave him an address to deliver goods, but Smith had already decided to leave this life behind. Still, he couldn't muster the courage to tell them. Later, Smith's mother saw some photos of him and Lila on his phone. Unaware that Lila was his class teacher, she was happy to see her son with someone. The next day during lunch, Lila visited Smith to collect a file. Smith reassured her that what happened between them wouldn't affect their friendship and that he still considered her a good friend. She smiled and left. However, things took a turn when Smith's mom saw Lila talking to other parents during a school meeting. She began to suspect that Lila was the same woman from the photos. When her turn came to meet Lila, her suspicion was confirmed. Furious, she confronted Lila, accusing her of wasting her son's time instead of helping him focus on his studies. She demanded that Lila end whatever was going on between them immediately, warning that she would expose everything if she didn't comply. Smith's mom stormed off in anger just as the principal arrived. Noticing her behavior, the principal asked Lila what happened. Lila lied, saying Smith's mom was just in a hurry to leave. When Smith returns home at night, his mom scolds him harshly and says, "You need to stop all this because she is your teacher." Smith responds, "This is not about being a teacher and a student. I love her and I can do anything for her." His dad supports him because Lila had positively influenced their son, but his mom refuses to accept this relationship. Meanwhile, Lila also tells her mother, who is furious, and says, "You should have thought about this before taking such a step." Leia's brother doesn't support her either, leaving her isolated. She now has to choose between her love or her family. On the other hand, Smith's mom keeps convincing his dad, saying, "What if tomorrow your daughter marries a middle-aged man?" Eventually, even his dad realizes this relationship is wrong, so he doesn't speak further. Smith decides to visit Lila at her home, but she asks him to leave as she doesn't want to lose her job. After a heated argument, Smith leaves. However, later that night he leaves a note saying sorry at her gate. When Leia sees it, she opens the gate and finds Smith standing there with flowers. They spend the night together and the next morning discuss what to do next. Smith suggests using his savings to move away together, but Lila declines, saying they need to think maturely. They go to school, where Andrew sees them talking and gets furious. Cheyenne adds fuel to the fire. That night when Lila is working late, Andrew forces himself on her. Smith notices her condition and gets extremely angry, but Lila stops him, saying Andrew knows about their relationship and warns him not to act recklessly. The next day, Smith loses control and attacks Andrew in school, leading to police intervention. Smith is arrested. Days later, when Smith is released, Lila is waiting for him outside, but his mom takes him away, leaving Lila heartbroken. Lila decides to Call Andrew and arranges a meeting. She reveals she has footage of the place where he assaulted her, threatening to file a complaint unless he withdraws his complaint against Smith. Andrew being cornered agrees. Days pass without Smith attending class, making Ilala feel guilty for ruining both their lives. She decides to move to another city to start anew. As she packs, SMI shows up crying. Upon seeing her packed bags, he asks where she's going and she tells him she has a train at 2 p.m. Smith, heartbroken, pleads on his knees begging her not to leave. Lila explains he has a bright future ahead, urging him to focus on his studies and career. Despite Smith's desperation, Lila has made up her mind. Smith returns home and breaks down. His mom consoles him, saying life isn't over yet, there will be more heartbreaks in the future. Meanwhile, Lila revisits the poetry that first sparked her feelings for Smith, and we return to the scene from the beginning of the story. Smith too mourns deeply. Staying confined to his room, it was perhaps the first time he truly felt heartbreak. Sometimes we must leave certain relationships incomplete for the good of both parties, because not everyone gets a perfect world. Some get the ground while others are left longing for the sky. Well, my question to you is, when was your first heartbreak? Share your story in the comments below. See you in the next video.